Hello, everybody. Welcome to Star Flag Media Gaming. I let you guys pick this week's video topic, and the majority of people who voted, not too many people voted, everyone got 7 votes, but out of the 7 votes, around at the time of this video, 67% of you chose that you wanted to hear about how Nintendo won the console war. Well, it got me to thinking. For decades, people have asked that same question, who really won the console wars? Was it Sony with the PlayStation dominating sales charts, Microsoft with the powerhouse Xbox and its online ecosystem, or was it Nintendo with their quirky underdog who always seemed to kind of do, their own thing? Well, today the answer is clearer than ever, because as Sony and Microsoft move toward a multi-platform future, Nintendo stands tall as the last true console maker. They still rely on their first-party exclusives. Now, in order to really look at how Nintendo has won the console wars, we got to rewind the tape here a little bit. Nintendo in the early days, the NES and SNES, starts off, of course, in the 1980s after the video game crash of 1983, where Atari flooded the market with absolutely terrible games. The Nintendo Entertainment System comes out, better known as the NES, and almost single-handedly revived the video game industry. With Mario, Zelda, and Metroid, Nintendo established the blueprint for console exclusives. And of course, they regulated the types of games and how many games publishers were allowed to put on their console, which really filtered out a lot of shovelware. Now, mind you, there were still bad games, but it just wasn't to the degree of, say, something like the Atari 2600. Then came the Super Nintendo. Now, during the NES days, we had a plethora of 8-bit consoles, but Nintendo was by far the king at that point. There really wasn't too much competition. People stuck with Nintendo. Yeah, the Master System was out there. Yeah, Atari had a 7600, I think 7800. That's what it was. There were competitors in the 8-bit era, but NES was king. And then came the Super Nintendo and the SNES. And this was the golden age, 16-bit classics. Super Mario World, A Link to the Past, Donkey Kong Country. And by the mid-90s, Nintendo had even passed Sega, which was its main rival. And really, Sega gave them a run for their money with the Sega Genesis. It was neck and neck there. But by the mid-90s, Nintendo had cemented themselves as the king of gaming. Then came the rise of the competition during the N64 and GameCube eras. Of course, the winds of change have arrived with the Sony PlayStation in 1994. While Nintendo stuck with cartridges, Sony embraced CDs and winning developers and gamers alike. Games were cheaper to make, faster to manufacture, and even less expensive for the gamer themselves. I remember personally during the N64 era, paying $100 almost for WCW versus NWO Revenge. This is back in 1998. And that's not inflation dollars, folks. That was true blue money back then, So the people are crying about $80 games today don't have a clue. But the N64 still managed to give us these classics, right? These exclusives. The first time we ever saw Mario 3D, full Nintendo 64 greatness, right? Ocarina of Time. And of course, multiplayer games like Mario Kart 64 and GoldenEye. But still, the N64 couldn't quite match the PlayStation's library. But how did they survive? Really, exclusivity. Their first party lineup was untouchable. Then came the GameCube. Now, while many people today view the GameCube as one of the greatest consoles ever made, and it truly was, at the time that the GameCube came out, people really didn't take to it. I remember I used to work at a Best Buy, and I used to really pitch the GameCube to families who would come in with, like, younger kids who wanted a video game system. Now, of course, they gravitated towards Grand Theft Auto and the PlayStation 2. And, PlayStation 2 was definitely ahead of the game at that point. And beloved by fans today, but at the time, it was a commercial underperformer. And by the early 2000s, Sony had taken that crown that Nintendo used to have. And Microsoft then replaced Sega to join the fight with the original Xbox. And Sega bowed out. So at this point, Nintendo has outlived Atari, they've outlived Sega, and they've outlived NEC, Neo Geo, other smaller competitors. Sony takes the crown after the GameCube era, with especially during the PlayStation 2 era. They solidified that they were going to be the big dog in town. And just when critics were counting out Nintendo, Nintendo shocks the world with the revolution. In 2006, they announced and bring out the Nintendo Wii. And instead of chasing power, they focused on accessibility with motion controls. Suddenly, everyone was gaming. Kids, parents, and even grandparents were getting in on the action with Wii Sports. And the Wii sold over 100 million units. I'm proving one thing, that innovation, not horsepower, could win generations. But lightning doesn't always strike twice in a row, because we had the following system that struggled, the Wii U era. The Wii U followed up in 2012, and frankly, it flopped. Poor marketing, confusing hardware, weak third-party support left Nintendo struggling. Meanwhile, Sony's PlayStation 4 was soaring. Microsoft was building their ecosystem with the Xbox One. And many really thought Nintendo might go the way of Sega, leaving hardware behind. Now, of course, they're discounting that the Wii U was still very profitable. Why? Exclusives. You can still only get those Mario, Metroids, Animal Crossings, Pikmins on their consoles. So even though it wasn't selling what the competition was doing, it was still profitable for Nintendo. They also had the 3DS. Handhelds are a different topic. Then, the comeback. In 2016, Nintendo unveils the Nintendo Switch, and everything changed. A hybrid console that works both at home and on the go. The Switch captured the best of the handheld gaming market, and it was bringing you console AAA experiences on the go. Literally. Yeah, it wasn't as powerful as its competition, but you can scale these games and still bring them out on the Switch. But more importantly, with exclusives like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Animal Crossing, Super Smash Bros., Nintendo built themselves a library of hits that no competitor could replicate. And the Switch, as of right now, has sold over 130 million units. It's making it one of the most successful systems of all time. And it looks like they're on path to surpassing the PlayStation 2 as the top-selling console if Nintendo decides that they're going to support the system for a couple of more years. Meanwhile, while Nintendo thrives, Sony and Microsoft decided that they wanted to take a different path. Sony built dominance with the PS4, but by the PS5 era, they began publishing their games on PC. Microsoft, with the Xbox Series X and S, doubled down on services like Game Pass and even started releasing their first party titles on PlayStation and Nintendo hardware. And now we see Sony. They're going the route of multi-platform. They've announced Helldivers 2 is coming out for the Xbox. And they're hiring a specific person to be in charge of bringing their games multi-platforms to Steam, GOG, Epic Game Store, and yes, Xbox and Nintendo. Sony's already got 4 Sony properties on the Switch, and it looks like they're going to be bringing more of their first-party properties to the Switch too as well. In other words, the lines between platforms are blurring. The console war between Sony and Microsoft, that's fading away. And then there's Nintendo. They never chased power after the GameCube. They never tried to be the Netflix of games. Instead, they focused on what made them unique. Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Kirby, Animal Crossing, the list goes on. Nintendo exclusives still define their consoles. If you want to play their games, you need their hardware. And that's something that neither Sony nor Microsoft can say anymore. So, who won the console wars? Sony and Microsoft may be giants, but they've shifted away from exclusivity. Nintendo, on the other hand, stuck to their guns and ended up with the strongest first-party lineup in gaming. The war is over. And in the end, Nintendo won by simply being Nintendo. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you have a favorite Nintendo first-party franchise? A favorite exclusive? If so, let me know. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate it. We're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers. We're almost there. As always, I appreciate you guys for joining me. And yeah, subscribe. Catch you guys in the next video.